Hello, everybody. Let's get started. I know the quality is good, but if you see an issue, please let me know right away. Um, Tesla stock is down 3%, 3.5%. Some volatility in the last minute here. Let's see if there's a headline going on. Give me 1 second. The fast moving market today, super fast moving market. Pretty amazing, actually. Um, I don't see anything right now. I don't see anything right now. Give me 1 second. Yeah, there's an uptick in the entire market at 1 p.m. I'm not sure what that is about, but it's a fast moving market. Earlier, there was a rumor that Trump was considering a 90-day pause to all tariffs except for China, and then that was um, rejected as invalid or false by the administration, and the stocks came back down, but it really stopped the momentum to the downside, which is really interesting. The rumor itself stopped the momentum to the downside. Actually S&P 500 surged 8-9%. Nvidia Tesla stock surged double that, 15-16%. And then it came back down, but basically to where it was before. Um, so the momentum died a little bit. So let's see what the news are like. Let's read our usual Reuters article here. Stock sell-off goes on. Trump warns of more China tariffs if it doesn't back off. Major stock indices fell again in volatile trading on Monday as U.S. President Trump said he will impose an additional 50% tariff on China if Beijing does not withdraw its retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. while the dollar and bond yields rose. I mean, that's another indication today. That's really interesting. Bond yields surged today, especially the long end of the curve, which is exactly what we've been discussing here. That might happen. And I think that's going to be very difficult for companies in the second quarter, third quarter, etc. So it's something I'm watching pretty closely. Uh, some steepening going on today in the bond market. China shares are down 9%. China ETF, large cap ETF, is down 9% today after Trump threatened additional tariffs. All right, let's continue. Also, White House denied the report that Trump is considering a 90-day pause on tariffs for all countries except China. The report, which the White House said was fake news, briefly turned U.S. stocks positive earlier. Markets have been turbulent amid the changing headlines. The U.S. stocks remained well off their lows for the day. You can tell shorts are on their hair trigger today. Watching our every corner for a possible Fed intervention, tariff pause, and trade deal. I don't think so. Oh, that's true. It goes to show you just how short-lived this market rally is likely to be, said Jamie Cox, managing partner at Harris Financial Group in Richmond, Virginia. Let's see what this Harris Financial Group is about. Harris Financial Group. Decades of experience applied to every aspect of financial planning, from taxes, social services, RIA, basically. Okay. James Cox is the managing partner. During a stint at Harris Financial Group with the firm's founder, Bob Harris, he realized he had found his calling. Okay. Determined to pursue a career that allowed to fulfill that personal mission. He went on board degree in chemistry and an MBA at VCU. Oh God. Okay. Let's continue with the article. Traders bet the increasing risk of recession could result in the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates as early as May. This is not. I don't think that's going to happen. Right now, the markets are pricing in about a 35% probability of a rate cut in May, which is in 30 days, a month from today. Actually, 38% now. And I think earlier this morning it was like 50%. I don't see that happening, but I guess we'll see. I think people are really optimistic about Fed cuts this year. Let's continue. Futures markets moved to price in almost 5 quarter point cuts in US rates this year. Stocks fell sharply at the opening, and the S&P 500 had been on pace to confirm a bear market amid concern Trump was showing no sign of backing away from his sweeping tariff plans. Stocks sold off sharply last week following the tariff announcement. Um, MSCI's gauge of stocks across the globe fell 24 points or 3%. The pain also engulfed European stocks, with recent market darlings such as defense shares particularly hurt as investors were forced to sell. Interesting. The Pan-European Stock 600 index fell 4.5%. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng 13% one-day slump was the largest since 1997. While the mainland China, the blue chip CSI 300 index was down 7%, only finding a floor when state media reported China's sovereign fund, Central Huijin, was a buyer. Well, I guess that didn't last that much because after Trump threatened another round of tariffs, China stocks went down quite a bit, or ETF went down quite a bit. The most surprising part today is treasury yields rose. I mean, I've seen calls for this, and I've kind of talked about it in here too. But on a day like this, the 10-year yield surging 13 basis points is quite amazing. And it combined with the fact that the Trump administration has been highlighting the drop in um, 10-year yield, it just completely wiped out the gains. So now it's up 17 basis points. The 10-year treasury is now up 17 basis points. 5-year treasury is up 11 basis points. 30-year treasury yield is up 22 basis points to 4.6 today. That is wild. That is wild. Banks sold off quite a bit again in the last couple of days here. Um, Down very substantially. If you remember, Warren Buffett had sold his Bank of America or reduced his bank. I think maybe he sold off or substantially reduced his Bank of America and Citigroup stakes a few months ago, and Apple stuck as well. I mean, Apple is so cheap right now. Um, the stock is down in the last couple of days here, 20% for a company like Apple. That is substantial. From the peak, Apple is down about 31%. PE ratio 28, but that needs to be adjusted for some of the balance sheet items here. And it's very cheap. But of course, as tariff wars escalate, that's going to hit Apple or the people, companies who have been manufacturing in China and importing to US the most. It also hits Tesla Energy. Tesla Energy, um, Tesla Energy imports all of its batteries. Oh, look at that machine is here. Look at this. Um, Tesla Energy imports all its batteries from China, and so that's a massive hit to the cost of production for energy megapacks and power walls as well. So I think we're going to see a big drop in energy margins in the coming quarters, and it might actually even turn negative margins. Tesla vehicles, Tesla Energy will turn might turn gross margin negative, but definitely bottom line negative in the next quarter or two here if these tariff wars don't end very, very soon. All right, let's see if Machine wants to come up. I sent an invite to speak, but it's playing hard to get again. Um, Let me see here. I'm going to do a couple of adjustments and then we're going to continue with the article. We're also expecting Meta today to join and maybe discuss a few things if he gets a chance. Asheen, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. What's new with you?
I'm just busy with work. Let's put it that way. Busy with life.
Hmm.
Um, how about you?
Same. Busy with life.
I congratulated you on all your calls to short all these stocks a
Hmm.
few months ago. So good job.
Thank you. Got lucky.
Well, I mean, I think yeah, maybe you thought certain things were specific aspects of each company would be issues, but I don't know. Ultimately, obviously, a lot of this is driven down by instability overall. Let's say.
Hmm.
But either way, it works out. So yeah, I
What do you
I
see
had
happening
never.
next?
I don't know. I mean, listen, I don't know. I think it was even hard for me, even though like I knew in the back of my mind, I'm like, I think I last one of the last times I came on to talk months ago was like, you know, everyone was very bullish post Trump election, and I'm like, these tariffs he's talking about, like when people realize what's going to happen, uh, that's not going to be good. There's not going to be a good reaction. But even myself kind of forgot about that, or just not really take it seriously because of his back and forth with Mexico and Canada, um, threatening to impose and then pulling back. And I still think, and this is not really a strong feeling because I'm just trying to understand, is that this is all two aspects I can think of that they're trying to do. One is it could still be mostly negotiating ploys with each country to try to reduce, I don't know, get benefits from those countries. I don't know. Most of these countries don't actually necessarily have tariffs against the US, so I don't know really what they're going to try to squeeze out of them, but I think he likes to get these uh quote victories and wins of making deals. I still think that would be partially the case. I think the other part is they really want to reduce the deficit, and I don't really know about how uh, refinancing debt works. You would know that much better than I. But if they can get the 10-year yield to come down temporarily, even I don't know, like if that's a benefit for when they have a lot of debt due and they can refinance. So I just wonder how much is doing that, and then would they let up on all this? I can't even call it narrative anymore. Let up on these tariffs. So I don't know. Like I mean, like many people, no one knows for sure. I think. What do you think?
I don't think these tariff rates are going to stay. I mean, the market doesn't think so either. You know, if the market believed that these tariff rates were here to stay for even a year or two, the market would be much lower today. And even though he's kind of out there, kind of talking them up that he's not going to change his mind and everything, nobody's buying it. And I mean, that would be um, a nuclear war, as someone put, I forget who. But this tariff war getting out of hand would be nuclear war, basically, on financial system, on the stock markets, any asset class. So, but I do think the 10% will stay. I think the 10% on all imports will stay. Um, is like, let's say it's likely to stay, and I think that alone is enough to put us in a recession. And the rest of the stuff is just kind of accelerates things. It's obviously a huge hit to consumer confidence, all this volatility, uncertainty, and it's showing up in the data, and not just in soft data, but also hard data too. GDP growth negative. I think Tesla sales are really struggling in the first week of April here, and I don't think Tesla is the only one. So, um, yeah, I think we're headed much lower.
Yeah, it could be. I'm trying to decide what to do. Um, there's been obviously a significant correction, but like you said, the fact is that even at 10% tariff, like I'm sure someone could do the calculations, but if you think about all the earnings of these companies, ones that sell hardware, of course, you can do direct computation of what the increase in operational expenses are, and then what that would do to their net profit. I mean, your net profit of these companies can get hit severely, more than 10%, right? A 10% increase in cost could easily cause a bigger than 10% decrease in earnings
Mhm.
uh, for some companies, right? And could make them even negative.
But that's not the problem, really. The problem really is around the uncertainty because nobody really knows how that 10% will work itself through the economy, global
Yeah.
economy. We don't know which companies, which sectors will be, which countries will be able to pass it on. We don't know what the consumers will do when that happens. And so that's going to take many months, a full year probably, to get the full effect. So, what do the central banks do during that time? They can't take action, really. I think the status quo bias is going to persist for much longer than people realize. So, um, this idea that Trump saying the Fed should lower rates and everything is, I think, is just, you know, it's not very realistic.
Yeah. I mean, prices could easily go up, obviously. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I,
I mean, the forecasts are rising to 3.5, maybe even higher, like 4, 5% core PCE level.
yeah. Huh.
This
Yeah.
can be bigger than COVID. I don't think
Absolutely.
people realize this can be bigger than COVID.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So, what do you? Well, how are you going to be? Like, you were short, but
I'm
like,
still
I don't
short.
know. Are you? You're not going to. You're not hedging out of those shorts at all into just even cash.
I have some plans, um, but not yet. I mean, I think these Tesla stock is going below $100 per share. I mean, that's pretty. I'm pretty confident in that. And but I have some plans. I'm getting
Yeah.
ready to kind of like think about what I would do next if
Yeah.
I covered and whatever. But I don't need to cover right now.
Yeah.
Even if Trump comes down and says, you know what, I changed my mind. I think they die. I think this is done deal. Like we're going to recession.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good point.
yeah. The only thing that could change it is if FSC becomes perfect all of a sudden, and we can get to that in a second. Adopt dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'm here to give you your flowers, man. My goodness, I've never seen such a big turnaround. You know, you're a value investor, you're a Buffett guy. Correct me if my history is wrong. Then you're a Tesla guy. You actually appear and do a question for the Elon, and then you go short, and here you are. So big time applause.
Thank you, but I we don't know if I got lucky or there's no way to know. I cannot prove if I got lucky or not. Right?
I
We
don't think
don't
it's
know what
luck.
will happen. We don't know what will happen if Trump didn't put these tariffs on.
I just think, you're playing cards here, and I think your assumptions have been correct. And I think some of it was being in the cult of personality, which I was in, you were in. I can name 2 or 3 other people right here that were in, and, that's the problem, is following Jim Jones in any scenario. And when Trump and Musk are the 2 biggest personalities that we, gravitate towards, that's the problem.
Okay. All right. Machine. FSD. Um, where do you see it going from here? FSD, robotaxis, Optimus.
I don't. I don't know what's new. Like, what's new? This stuff. It's pretty good, but are we really at a scalable point for robo taxis? I don't know. Like, it's I mean, honestly, my opinions are wait and see to see what they can really do. Let's say in Austin, in allegedly just a few months now. Um, outside of that, for Optimus. We get some videos once in a while of it walking. I don't think things are moving super quickly there. I still think long term those things could be profitable businesses for Tesla, but exactly how much value can you attribute to them? It's hard to say. So, I don't personally find it super exciting on when you have those things on top of a business model that the other part of the business that's making money is worsening. So that's kind of a hard balance. It's an interesting challenge. I just wonder for people if they weren't invested in that company already, if they were just starting from scratch, would they attach onto it?
Yeah. Which do you think will generate the first billion in profits, Robotaxi or Optimus?
I don't know.
What do you think of the humanoids coming out of China from Unit 3 and others, as well as the other figure AI?
I think what I said last time is, Tesla doesn't have unlike FSD, Tesla doesn't have any real data advantage with Optimus. Their advantage would be building the hardware. But I don't know if they have that big of a lead anymore on that.
I mean,
So,
after Cybertruck debacle.
um, so it just seems like, yeah, you can say these other companies just have prototypes, but so does Tesla. And I think the machinery is not as complicated as a car, so it's going to
Order of magnitude less carbon.
yeah. So I think it's easier for other companies to build their own or outsource and put it together to put these robots together.
Not to mention that they can actually build the vehicles better than Tesla. Better, faster,
Maybe that too.
cheaper. Yeah.
So I think for Optimus, I think Tesla's
Not to mention, they have a CEO that's motivated and
well, that's
on site. There's a lot of other reasons, but I just don't think Optimus. Yeah.
I don't think I don't think Tesla has a real big advantage now with Optimus. So you have to think, what value are you going to get out of Tesla as an investment from these future opportunities? Optimus could be successful, but that doesn't mean it's going to make a lot of money. It's really hard to value. You're going to have a lot of competition, which means there's going to be a lot of bots flooding the market. Tesla doesn't have an advantage for building up the software for providing functionality for these robots. So there's going to be a lot, which means they simply can't charge high exorbitant prices for it, which means they'll make some money, but their operational margins are not going to be super high. And so you have to go value out how many they can sell and then discount back for what you think the present day value is going to be. And I think now it's going to be less than people thought before. And really the same for robotaxis, in the fact that for China specifically, there's plenty of other companies who may have worse scalability of their systems, but they'll just drive their operational incomes to zero to compete with Tesla. And so I don't think Tesla's going to make much money in China either. So you're really coming down for Tesla. Future valuation now is down to how much money can they make in robotaxis in the US and maybe Europe. Although
There's no robotaxis. Do you see robotaxis proliferating in the next couple of years in the US?
For Tesla?
Vision only.
I'm not that I don't think LiDAR limitation is the main issue here. But I just think people underestimate how hard it is to scale these things from this, not just from the software, but from the
So
hardware.
that's a no. Okay, so that's a no.
Yeah.
So that explains why you kind of stopped answering the question, robotaxis or Optimus, because we don't know if any of those will materialize.
Exactly.
Now, one quick question. When Elon bought Twitter in 2022, I think, whatever time it was, in the first couple of quarters, a lot of people were talking about brand damage risk, becoming political brand damage risk. And you were very loud in arguing that there is no data that shows there is brand damage. And then obviously, we now know there's tremendous brand damage across the world, especially in the US, across Tesla's vehicles, not to mention other things. So, what do you think you missed?
When did I say that?
In the first couple of quarters, during the first 3 to 6 months, as the stock was declining after Elon bought Twitter, people were arguing there's brand damage risk. And you were very loud that there is no data that shows there's any brand damage.
I don't. Yeah, I think at that time, if you looked at the drop in demand for Tesla EVs, it was similar to drop in demand for other EVs. And part of that could be prescribed to the increase in interest rates and overall sentiment for EVs. And so then it was harder to parse out really was there much due to Musk. And I think that data still supports that claim for that time period. The question is now you have a longer time period to show out that Tesla values have gone down outside of other EV brands or what could be explained by interest rates alone. And so now you have more information that there was more brand damage. But even, I haven't looked lately at like what price drops have happened to Polestar or Rivian over the last 6 to 12 months. So I'm still not sure of that, how much was due to brand damage. I would think if there's any brand damage, like the best chance is obviously in the last 3 4 months. And if I had to bet, if I had to bet, I would definitely bet there's been brand damage. Still don't know if there's enough quantifiable evidence specific to Tesla to prove that the demand for Teslas compared to other like vehicles, so you have to compare it to EVs, has gone down. I don't know. I expect it to show up. I just don't know if we have it yet. What do you think?
Well, I go by Troy, and he estimates tens of thousands, several tens of thousands of vehicles in the US alone, and hundreds of thousands across the world. I mean, this is not just a US thing. I also see it much more pronounced in my personal life as well. People are just really, and I saw this last year too, and the year before, when I used to speak to people, why did you buy this Toyota hybrid instead of a Tesla? And the people would get like visibly shaken about how much they hate Elon Musk. And today, since then, that's only grown, obviously, it's only spread. There are many ways of measuring it. But anyway, we can leave that aside. Are you flat, short, or long Tesla now?
I have no Tesla position. So, I regrettably, I shorted when it was at the top in the 450s. I should have just I should have just held on to that. But
Why'd you close it?
because it dropped quite a bit and I had been short call spread, so it was, a limited profitability anyways, right? If I had bought puts, then there'd be more motivation to hold on longer. So,
What's keeping you from shorting the stock today?
that's a good question. I mean, honestly, I'm thinking
Thank
about
you.
my whole perspective too, because there's just market sentiment and then Tesla on top of that. And because when you invest in a specific stock, you're really also investing in what do you expect to happen with macro. Um, I don't know where macro is going to head right now. You seem to think confidently that it's going to head much lower, which I mean, just from an earnings decrease potential, I could definitely happen. So I've been like net. I have like out of the money sold puts, but so those are getting hit some. And if there's gonna be a further drop, like it's still in my benefit to close them out. Uh, but I don't know, anything could happen too with reversal of
When did you sell the puts?
Well, I mean, I had some a month ago, and then even Friday after the drop of 2 days, I sold some more out of the money. But those could worsen.
What's the strike price?
Well, I'm using it. It's essentially, I have to calculate the equivalent as on QQQ, but it's probably equivalent to like maybe 400, maybe 410 or something like that. So a little bit out of money. And
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you basically believe that this drop is similar to the early 2022 drop.
I don't have strong belief of anything. I think just long term.
Well, that's what it sounds like, because the early 2022 drop on QQQ was from peak to trough was about 30%, and QQQ is now at about 20%. So you're saying it's not going to pass that, really?
Right. I'm thinking of a long term perspective, but that could be totally wrong, right? I mean, I'm like, this is like, if these, like, I take your point to be the midpoint, which is why I'm constantly reassessing, which is obviously if these tariffs stayed as is, they would be so destructive to earnings. A 30% correction is a joke. We're talking way below that, right? Just from a destruction of earnings. Like you could go down well below
See,
that.
I think that's where you're wrong. That's where you're wrong.
How? I didn't even finish
Hey,
my point.
No, you're already wrong. Congratulations. Even if these tariff rates did not stay, I think this pullback is the start. I don't think anyone expects these tariff rates are going to stay. I think the 10% is reasonable or within expectations, I guess. I think people are underestimating the economic impact of even 10% tariffs. But I don't think anyone is expecting these tariff rates to stay here for any period, like any period other than for negotiation purposes.
All right. So let's just say tomorrow
Mhm.
he announces that all the tariffs have been all the countries have agreed to his demands and all the tariffs have been revoked. I would expect very short
Even the
term.
10%.
Even that's what I'm saying. You have to separate these out. If he just said all the tariffs were removed,
Mhm.
I think you would have a huge positive reaction
Yeah,
in the stock
you
market.
would get a
I don't
bounce. I
know
mean, we
what the
just saw that today. Yeah.
I don't know what right. I don't know what the long term residual would be. I don't know if there'd be much other than just not be less trust in the U.S. institutions.
Less trust. Yep, less trust.
But so I'm trying to separate out these larger effects versus now. If you talk about just 10%, I mean, I think 10%. If 10% stays by itself is destructive, which I think is what you're arguing. Is that ignore all the other bowstring that he's doing on these high percent tariffs on specific companies or countries. If there's 10% across the board, people are underestimating the destruction that can cause. That's your point, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where I'm not positioned for that. I'm calling that the middle case, right? Which is like the most likely outcome is 10% tariffs across the board.
Not according to him.
Well,
according to him, these tariffs are here to stay.
Yeah.
He says that he's not going to change his mind. Peter Navarro went on CNBC today and said it's not about the tariff rates. It's about the non-tariff barriers for US to export its goods and services to other countries. He's trying to get rid of the VAT, value-added tax in EU. And there are economists out there saying this guy's out of his mind because the VAT is essentially a sales tax, which is what we do here as well, and that applies to every goods and service sold in Europe. So how in the world are they going to be able to remove that? So it looks like Peter Navarro and Lutnick have Trump's ear, and Besant is kind of playing along, is what I kind of see. And all the calls from the billionaires, including Elon, Bill Ackman, are just ignored. So, and but in any case, I still think this is just a negotiation. But let me ask you one more thing before I go to adopt. How much time do you have, Machine?
Yeah, I got a little bit more time.
Okay. Let me ask you one more thing. Let's assume the tariff. So this is a game theory question. Let's
Yeah.
assume this tariff war continues for some time. Who would win in the end? Who has more staying power? And just focus on US and China.
I feel like I'm not an expert in this area, but if I just had to think about staying power in terms of their ability to isolate and produce everything themselves and take the hit, I just think China would win
Yeah,
for sure.
I think so.
So I don't necessarily think, yeah, it's a good ploy to try
I
to hold
don't
out
think
China.
like I don't I like people say Trump is an idiot, he doesn't know what he's doing, etc. But I really have a hard time finding that the person who got elected twice, US president, doesn't know what he's doing. Same with Elon. The person who's the richest person on earth doesn't know what he's doing. Idea, I don't think it's correct, but they can always be wrong. They can always be wrong. I mean, they were wrong in Wisconsin. Adopt Docs, quick question, and now we're gonna move you down. Focus on some AI talk.
Okay, your point on Toyotas and hybrids and plugins was good because I noticed a couple of years ago it was women first. We're having this, repulsion, and it was towards Elon, and it takes men longer to figure that out, and I think that's where we're at now. And the other thing that's a lot of things coinciding, it could be that just China is destined to take over EVs, and it's just happening right now at the same time. And obviously,
Okay.
Elon saw this, and I don't want to call Elon dumb or Trump dumb. I'm just saying they can't help themselves. They have some flaws like we all do. They cannot help themselves in what they do sometimes. So,
Okay.
anyway, China is today where Toyota, Datsun, and then the other Japanese were in the 1970s. This is the similar thing.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I think just to wrap this macro conversation, unless you guys want to talk about macro, I think this has the potential to be more than COVID. People compare it to 1929, 1930. It can even be bigger than that. It's gonna. I think it's gonna be bigger than COVID if 10% stays and the other stuff goes away. But if the other stuff stays for several months, it can be worse than 1929, 1930 period. All right, machine and then meta.
So just last question on that. So take two cases. One, 10% stays, and two, all of them get revoked, which I think is there's no tariffs. I think very unlikely. If the 10% stays, what is the like what is your best optimistic case if the 10% stays? We're still going to have earnings decline. Like I don't think net S&P earnings could be flat or increasing in that case. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think earnings recession is in the books either way. And yeah, I'm guessing you're asking for macro overall. Yeah, I think earnings recession is in the books anyway. I think there are other fundamental reasons why these and inflation would go up. Like inflation is already sticky at a higher level at 2.5 to 3%. And even with 10% tariffs, you're looking at even higher inflation rates. So people have raised their forecast to 3.5, even assuming these absurd rates come back down and just 10% basis. Meta, what do you think? Any comments on macro?
I don't know where to start, but I think I kind of like somebody on X shared Warren Buffett's idea from 2003 with me, and I think that's probably the best strategy on tariffs. I really disagree with this notion of balancing import export with every single country, but I like Warren Buffett's idea of import credit certificates. I had never heard it. I don't know why it's not that much more popular. Somebody should be like popularizing it more. But the idea was basically every time you export, you get $1 credit, and you create a free market for those certificates, and importers have to buy the credits, just like EV, zero emission credits. So, and you could control it. So you could say every dollar you export, you get 80 cents back, or whatever, however you want to make your lopsided import export balance be for as a country. If you want to export more, yeah. If you want to import more, sure, you could do that too. That would be better. It would be free market, and it would allow you to like balance it across different countries. It feels like we're picking a fight with China a little unnecessarily. Maybe it's necessary. Maybe people feel like it's a thing. I personally think there's a lot of misunderstandings in how some of the administration's approaching things, and I don't think it's that they misunderstand it. I think they're just intentionally presenting it as a misunderstanding. But yeah, like this notion that you're going to raise money on tariffs while also onshoring. Okay, that seems weird. But then if you go to the second derivative, once you onshore, you can tax the onshore stuff. So maybe it's okay. Maybe it is just a one-time thing to get like the debt paid down more. I think all those things make sense, but I've constantly been of the opinion that debt is not a bad thing for the United States government because we inflate our way out of debt. So just continue to inflate your way out of debt. Just don't take on way more debt than inflation. And as
Well, I
the
mean,
Fed
look at
unwinds,
this.
it solves its
Look at
problem.
the long end of the curve. I mean, they're rising. So I don't know if inflating your way out of debt this time
Well,
is.
the problem is the rate at which we took on debt needs to be unwound. I agree with that.
Yeah.
So like Doge,
The
I think is
problem
a
is
better solution
AI.
to that.
AI productivity is not coming fast enough. AI productivity is not spreading across the country and the world as fast as many people predicted,
People are
including
working on
myself.
it, man. It's hard.
Yeah, we'll work harder, but it's not. That's not the problem. And I said this before in AI amateurs. Um, you know, um, people working on it is not the problem. They're working really hard. They're producing good quality work that is useful, but the product is not spreading. Like I think FSD does make you safer, a lot. If supervised by a human and used properly. But most people don't want to do that. They want to be able to check their phones so it doesn't spread. Most people don't want to pay for it, especially in an environment like this, so it doesn't spread. ChatGPT, Gemini are really good. Grok is really bad, but the other two are really good. And I use it all the time, both of them.
Have you
And
tried Claude?
no, I haven't tried Claude.
Give
I'll
it a
try
shot.
it. Okay, I'll try it. And I pay for all three, and but most people don't. Like just yesterday or Saturday, I was talking to somebody who says, I said, "Do you use ChatGPT?" And he goes, "No." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, because of the impact on the environment. I know it uses a lot of electricity, you know." And this is the mentality for tens of millions of people in the U.S. and hundreds of millions of people, if not a billion people around the world. And these are high income people. A lot of them are high income people, and they've been told a story and they just don't want to. I mean, I know, you don't need more than 300 miles of range, but people are on an EV, and people don't use it. They want 500, and that's what they believe, and that's what they base their purchase decisions on. So you and I aren't going to change it in the near term. It's going to take a lot of time. And the
I
same with
agree. I
AI.
agree. It won't happen at a fast pace, but a lot of these things unfortunately do take a generation, right? Some
Mhm.
people in older generations just never got used to using the internet. They kind of use it, but not really. Then there's other people in the generation that never got used to social media, and there's going to be future generations that don't get used to AI.
Okay. Let me ask you about a question that Kevin Weber asked on YouTube. Hopefully, either Machine or Meta could explain Green Deal on his tweet about the NNs and partition size. I haven't seen it before, so let me just read that real quick, and then I can ask you guys about it. Green says, got a bit of free time over the weekend and noticed that hardware force size of NNs in V13 ballooned from 2.3 G to total in V12.x to 7.5 G on just node B in V13 and 2.3 G on node A. For comparison, hardware 3 is
Could you
1.2 G.
post this, Yaman? It'll be easier to read
Yeah.
than
Yeah. Give me one sec. It's basically his latest thread. And now on the top of your screens, and I'll show it on YouTube as well. Got a bit of free time over the weekend. I noticed that hardware 4 size of NNs in V13 ballooned from 2.3G total in V12.x to 7.5G on just node B in V13 and 2.3G on node A. For comparison, hardware 3's 1.2G node A, 3.1 node B, now on V12.6. So I decided to look some more into it. He continues. Just the same as on hardware 3, node B now contains all the secret E2E bits that have some extra encryption applied to protect it. Node A has 189 NS. Actually, should we go tweet by tweet on this, Meta?
Yeah, I think we should go
Okay.
not even tweet by tweet, but segment by segment.
Okay, go ahead.
So the first thing is, what is node A and node B? There are two parallel trip chips in both hardware 4 and hardware
Yep.
3. A lot of people, I think I've even heard Machine say this at times, Green Power and others, kept saying that they must be using both chips, blah, blah, blah. Both models are running, the model's consuming everything on the thing. I have constantly been of the opinion that they're probably using one for shadow mode. And then eventually when the model is good enough, then you can kick off shadow mode and then you have a redundant network. Maybe you have a secondary network like the latest version, the second latest version. And if you have to fall down to the second latest version, you can, in the event that the first one just absolutely crashes. But the shadow mode, my guess, is running on node A or B, depending on which release they're on. So the way it would work is you ship one release to A, then you say, okay, flip from B to A, and then you ship the next release to B, then you say, okay, flip from A to B, and so on and so forth. And then while you're running on one, you can send updates to the second one behind the scenes to run shadow mode and do A/B testing. And you can also have it preloaded for you to then route the traffic over when somebody does the update and says, okay, I'm ready to take the update and switch my stuff over. This would also explain why some of the updates recently have been really, really fast, because most of the weights are already loaded. You're just loading in the patches to switch it over, switch UI stuff over, etc. Machine just left. But that's my guess as to what they're talking about. So when we look at it in that sense, if that understanding is correct, then what you can see is he's talking about how on V13, when he says ballooned, what he's basically saying is they have a larger model. They have a model that's tripled in size, roughly, which is not surprising if you go back to Ashok's original tweet that they were going to make a hardware 3 specific model that was 3 times the size, right? So this is roughly that appearing in shadow mode on the devices.
Exactly. That's what I thought too. Okay. So the second tweet, just the same as on hardware 3, node B now contains all the secret E2E bits that have some extra encryption applied to protect it. Node A has 189 NNs and node B only has 110 NNs, and of those, 61 are shared between A and B. Okay? So there goes your redundancy.
Again, the redundancy argument, he just doesn't understand how software releases are done.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting to see that there are 135 NNs that are shared between hardware 3 and hardware 4 in current releases. Anything on that?
I mean, so he's coming at it from a perspective of defining what a neural net is. I would have to see how he's figuring that out. Because with V12 onwards, they said they're going with a single neural net, and I take them at their word that that is what they're doing. What could be the case is potentially he's confusing matrices with neural nets. You can have segmented matrices rather than having your entire neural net represented by one giant file. You segment it into many different files, like the first few layers, second few layers. This would make sense because oftentimes what you do is LoRa adaptation, and you're fine tuning and training. So then you only are going to affect certain files. But when you load it onto the chipset, you stitch it all back together. So in that sense, the word neural net is the wrong word to use here. But what it would mean is that, yes, there's a large part of the training set that is the same between hardware 3 and 4. And then there is a bunch of stuff that is different. Again, that's not that different. It's like taking two brains and saying the visual cortex is different on hardware 4. The motor cortex remains the same on hardware 3 and 4. Okay, that would make sense why there's a bunch of matrices that look very similar.
Okay, thank you. Third tweet. it's also interesting that all those factory driverless stuff have a dedicated E2E set of 9 subnetworks, which makes me think they might not be entirely as environment agnostic as some people want to believe. Ooh, that's a big claim. What do you think about that?
Again, I don't believe that they're environment agnostic. So sure. Like I've always said, it's going to be city by city rollout. They could certainly be fine tuning to the cities. Yeah, I don't see that as a problem. But again, he would have to really go into how does he know what the loaded data on a chipset looks like? That he's drawing a lot of inference on files he's seeing on the system. Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. I would just put a giant asterisk on this.
Okay. There are other E2E bits for highway, city streets, and destination for when you approach a destination. All these actually exist in 2 forms, normal and low speed, except factory where everything is low speed anyway.
Yeah, so okay, what if the things that are in the factory just have a newer version? Like he's making this assumption that
I mean, I don't know.
it's
Honestly,
dedicated, right?
this whole thread supports the idea that the Austin network is going to be some low speed, limited to maybe 20, 25 miles per hour. Optimized for a few streets, some area, which is exactly what Waymo
Yeah.
did. I mean, do you
Yeah,
disagree with that?
I agree. No. I think
Yeah.
they've even said it clearly. They're going to follow the Waymo playbook, but also because legally that is required.
Mhm.
Like 25 miles and under is treated very differently because of the fatality rate with a human collision, like a VRU.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? The chances of survival, I think, are like nearly impossibly low if it's over 25 miles per hour.
Okay. Do you think it's going to happen in June?
I still think in June they will launch something. I think there'll be safety drivers behind the wheel, but they will launch something, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think we shouldn't be surprised if we shouldn't read into it like they failed, because that's exactly how Waymo would have done it too. I just think even though Texas is very liberal with its regulations and everything, it would be good practice to practice the rollout the way you would do in California. So once your intervention is low enough, you can just roll it out everywhere, because I don't know. I don't see what's wrong with California's AV rules, except the fact that they require you to print your intervention data statewide rather than just in the regions in which you've launched.
Okay. Curious that the 7.6G size is really pushing against the 8 gig forward partition size on hardware 4, and reminds me of hardware 3 situation where it premiered with 1 gig. What are you laughing at? Am I mispronouncing
No.
that?
I'll tell you in a second. Continue.
Okay. 1 gig forward partition size in 2019, but mid 2021, they suddenly found that not enough and had to play some partitioning tricks to grow the partitions to 2G. And then even that turned out to be not enough. So towards the end of 2024, they further extended the partitions to 3.5G and are close to bump against those again.
Green does not understand how neural nets work or how AI works. Give me my core statement here. Okay.
I mean, here's the problem.
Mhm.
Okay. You're telling me that he doesn't understand software,
No.
that he's a systems engineer,
Yeah.
that he doesn't understand this and that. But the fact is,
Let me explain it, and then you'll
this
understand what
guy,
he doesn't understand.
I just want to say one more thing.
Okay.
This guy has been the absolute most correct when it comes to FSD of literally everyone on earth.
He is doing something almost anybody who doesn't have ethics can do, which is to pull data on old devices Tesla had that were not encrypted, and just looking at the file system and drawing conclusions based on what's on the file system.
Whatever his methods are, green the only is, I mean, this is not an offense to you. I wish I was able
He
to do
hasn't
what
made
he's doing.
predictions that could be
I
proved
wish
falsifiable.
I wish
You're wrong.
he has. He said
You're wrong.
many times. He said many times that robotaxis are years away, and year after year after year has been correct.
And he'll continue to be right until he's wrong. He'll be right until he's wrong. This is a stupid statement. Let's just move on to what the explanation
No. One more thing. Elon has been saying robotaxis are coming at the end of this year.
Every day I wake up and I say it's not going to rain, and I'm right. I'm Nostradamus.
Year after year. And so far, the count is green is 9, Elon is 0. Okay, and the
That's
same is true for
that
Troy
is
when it comes to
amazing.
deliveries.
That is amazing logic. Stick to that logic. Keep sticking to that logic. Let's move on. I don't want to talk about silly logic.
It's not logic; it's a fact.
I agree. It's not logic. It's silly logic.
It's a fact. You can't disagree with facts.
I can disagree with the representation of facts. You
Mhm.
can draw bad conclusions from data. I could run a sample study and something that has 99.99% accuracy, take the 1.00001% example and then be like, this is not a good test because it fails sometimes. And you would be practicing bad science.
Yeah.
So don't just look at
Look,
data.
I'm not
Look at the
I'm not saying you're wrong on the thread. I'm not saying he's right on the thread. I'm just stating the fact that he has literally is the most correct person on earth, including Elon and Tesla employees and anybody in this space.
This guy declared you wouldn't be able to put larger models on the cars way earlier, and hardware 3 continued to receive updates. And he's making the same mistake today that he did then. And here's the explanation. If you have a bucket of 8 gigs and you can put something in there that's 6 gigs big, or you could put something in that's 8 gigs big, why would you put something that's 6 gigs big? The other 2 gigabytes not being used does nothing for you. Zero for you. The fact that they weren't using the entirety of the space had everything to do with the fact that they even said this. Ashok said this, right? First, they made a model that was tuned for hardware 3. Then they shipped a hardware model that had a higher input because it took in everything for hardware 4. That doesn't mean that they trained the entire thing to be taking up the full capacity that they had. Now they're training something that takes up the full capacity. Networks are sparse. So you take up the whole 8 gigs, you ship your model. And Green the only looks at that and says, well, because they're using the entirety of the space, I'm going to assume that Tesla has done something that nobody in AI has done, and that is to build a very dense model. And therefore, from that, I'm going to conclude that they're out of space. That is the most stupid thing ever, because all it's saying is they have now extended their capacity to be able to have a much richer model in 7.5 gigs. If he wants to know how sparse it is, what he should be doing is going into the neural net and see how many floating points have low values. But I bet he can't look at that because it's encrypted.
Okay.
I bet you most of that file is 0 or close to 0.
Look, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. And so what do you think is the next step here for Tesla then? What kind of performance do you expect when Tesla starts rolling out? Let's say they achieve their, I'm going to bet a coffee on that with anybody, but let's say they achieve their June timeline estimate. What kind of
Good
performance do you
question, yeah.
expect, and how do you think it's going to progress over the next couple of years?
I think their accident rates will be similar to Waymo, and the rollout's going to be very similar to Waymo. And a lot of people are going to be disappointed that the safety numbers look very similar, but that's probably what's going to happen. And I think it has less to do with Tesla. But when Waymo controlled for accidents below, I think it was like 5 or 3 miles, whatever it was per hour, primarily all the accidents were happening at that speed. And most of them were fender benders or bumps from other vehicles hitting the Waymo, not the Waymo hitting them. I do expect that within short order, again, timelines are not my estimation forte, but if they execute well, within short order, they should be able to get to a point where within 3 to 6 months of safety drivers, they can remove the safety drivers and they can have a similar accident rate as Waymo does, which would be other parties at fault, not them at fault, for the most part. There will probably be traffic jams that they create and various things like that, just like Waymo did in the beginning. And then they're going to have to jump on it and be like, write little adaptations for different areas. There will be special events and they will go into places they're not supposed to go. And then they'll have to write special, handling for that. But if they do it well, they have the ability to execute as well as Waymo. I don't
That's a
expect them
big
to
claim.
supersede Waymo, to be clear. I'm not sure that there's a huge innovation happening at Tesla that suddenly allows them to supersede Waymo. But they'll be on order. Maybe at most, Waymo would be 10x safer at most, but that's already extremely safe compared to humans.
Yeah, I agree. I think both will be safer than humans. Okay, so you're saying that maybe Tesla will be able to remove the safety driver by the end of this year.
Yeah, maybe. I could see them shooting for that. It comes down to a lot of factors like laws, comfort with regulations, all that kind of stuff. So it's hard for me to say what's going to happen there. But I do think what they would have to show is there's a human behind the wheel the whole time. They're not touching the wheel. They're not doing anything. And that anytime something needed to be touched, the human in the car didn't have to do anything. The remote intervention handled it all. And the person in the car is just going to sit there and not actually do anything. But they're there just in case I really, really get stuck.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take the other side of that deal. I'll take the other side. I don't think they're going to be able to roll it out in June. I don't think they're going to
Again,
be
I'm
able to
answering
remove
what they
safety
should
driver.
be able to do. Whether if they don't
Yeah.
do this, it's bad
Yeah.
execution on an engineering standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I still don't know of any Uber driver who uses FSD, which is saying something.
I don't. I think it's saying different things to you and me. It's saying to me that Uber drivers don't have a lot of money, and that's why they drive Uber. So they would rather keep a higher margin by driving themselves. Like
I mean, they keep the
most
same
people,
margin if they
I know.
use FSD or not.
No. They have to pay out. It costs the money to get the FSD in the first place, or to pay.
Well, I understand, but basically, what that means is the price isn't
Yes.
below the value provided.
Yes. So to
Right.
them, it doesn't make them make that much more money, or more, even more so. I would argue there's so many savings accounts out there that pay way more than most people's checking accounts, and yet people still keep their money in checking accounts. People don't make the most optimized decision.
Yeah. That's why
Especially, I would argue,
when I say that point, I say I don't know of any Uber driver, as opposed to saying most Uber drivers don't use FSD.
Okay, I mean, you
Because
know
if
of at
any
least one
use,
Uber driver that uses it, right? He has a YouTube channel, and you used to quote him all the time. So there definitely exist Uber drivers that use FSD.
well, yeah, I do kind of question people's motives sometimes, as you know.
But like, okay,
But,
so
yeah.
how would you know about an Uber driver that uses FSD who doesn't have a channel? And unless you're taking a ton of Ubers and asking them, I've had Uber
I
drivers
use
in
Ubers.
San
Yeah, I use
Francisco who use
Ubers.
FSD.
Yeah, I use. I mean, yeah, exactly. Maybe you did. Yeah, I use Ubers. I have, Tesla. I mean, it's also. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Well, so thanks for explaining the green deal on the tweet.
I
Let's
think this is
see.
very
Yeah.
promising to me personally, because I'm hoping this 3x larger model is actually coming with a 3x larger context window. It would make sense because they're doing a retrain. It's a fundamental retrain when you increase the size of the model. Therefore, it's a good time to also do a fundamental retrain of the input context. And based on their naming convention, I wouldn't be surprised if they call this V14, even though Ashok said they were going to include this as part of 13. They did have to retrain. I don't know. They could bump up the number if they want, or they could not. That's up to them. But to me, this is as big of a jump as you would see from a 12 to 13.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's probably V14 probably will be as big of a jump as V12 to 13. I totally agree with you.
No, I'm saying this next release
V15,
with the larger model, whether they call it 14 or not.
that's going to be 14.
Oh, you think
It's
it'll be
going to
14?
be later
Yeah, they
this
probably
year.
will about
Later
14.
this year. Yeah. Probably going to come out later this year, go wide early next year. Then V15 will be the same, kind of like similar improvement from V14.
You think
And
it
then we'll
comes out
go on.
after June, not before?
Yeah, I don't see V14 coming out in June. I think it's going to be later this year.
Sorry, just to be clear, this larger model, the 3x larger model for Tesla, that's whether we call that 14 or not. You don't think that comes out before June?
I don't know. I mean, if you remember, in the second half of 2024, or maybe like mid 2024, we started hearing about V13, that they were testing this and that, maybe parts of V13 end-to-end models. He did a whole demo ride.
Yeah, it takes a while to validate. Yeah,
he posted a bunch of predictions of how much better it was going. It was going to be like 10 times better, blah blah blah, and it just obviously never happened. While I have someone's, we're citing Elon's quotations, I should add at the top this legal document from Elon's lawyers saying statements of mere puffing are not actually material misrepresented under federal securities laws, because no reasonable investor would rely on such statements. So whenever we quote Elon, just make sure you understand they're all mere puffing.
Yeah, I know. Just like, Space's titles in X
Yeah,
are mere
exactly.
puffery.
Exactly.
Like saying something will 3x is mere
Yeah.
puffery.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. I need to put that back on there to remind myself I can be wrong. But you know what? I'm not gifting myself tens of billions of dollars of stock options.
Yeah,
Wave,
fair.
Wave, go ahead.
Hey guys, enjoying the conversation. Thanks for the insight. I had a question for Meta. Uh, on hardware 3, what's your conviction as far as getting unsupervised FSD and when?
I'm not going to answer when, but it will eventually happen. Probably before those cars are no longer viable for road vehicle use, right? Like that doesn't say much because those vehicles probably last a long time. But in terms of like engineering wise, how you would do this is you would want to perfect the larger model, the largest model you can first. That includes the one in the cloud. You perfect the cloud model. That gives you a sense of what you predict is going to happen. Now, let's say Elon says he thinks it's going to be 10x better, and it gets out in the market, and you only see a 5 to 6x better. That means you have some real world skew happening, right? So there's a skew between your data and what's in the cloud. You then go and you try and make the real world model better, and then the next time around, maybe instead of being off by 2x, you're off by 30%, and then maybe you're off by 10%. The better you can get at predicting what is going to happen when you release it, and having like accuracy, the better off you'll be. Now, you don't just measure overall interventions, right? That's way too broad of a brush. What they're going to be measuring is like how often did it get the stop signs right? How often did it get the stoplights right? How often did it have jerk on a rotation? And how often did it get rain right? Slick, this, that, and the other. So you have all these different categories. Look across all the different dimensions, and you see, okay, where are we having high skew, low skew? And maybe a ton of the interventions are happening because of one little thing. So they're high frequency, but from their perspective, low unique failure. So you know how you're normalizing the data when you're saying it's better or worse is also a different question. But from an engineering standpoint, you would probably want to look at unique failures because you only solve the problems once, irrespective of how frequent they are. So once you've gotten that to a point where you're satisfied, then distilling that down is fairly well understood. I know that machine would come in and say, well, you're going to have loss and the quality will be lower, et cetera, but that's predictable. So if you want to get to, 100, then you know that your quality needs to be at 110. Okay, great. So let's get to 110, then we can distill down and we'll be at 100.
Does that include the context window as well? And can you answer the same question for hardware 4?
So the context window, I think, is absolutely critical for hardware 4. They can use the context window. I think for hardware 3, the context window might be harder only because it would mean giving up reaction time. I think they have the headroom to give up the reaction time on hardware 3, but for whatever reason, they've been hesitant to do so. I think it's because they want to achieve 10 times better than human or whatever their goals are. There are ways they could achieve it that are different than that, right? Like, let's say, like, I don't see what the data they're looking at is, but if I was looking at their data and I noticed that majority of the places where hardware 3 was not performing had to do with like certain lighting conditions or certain controllable operational domains, then I might say, okay, let's focus on the domains where this thing shines. Let's get it to equal safety there. And only after that is achieved, do we then need to say, from a business standpoint, should we just use these vehicles only during that ODD? Or should we actually bother to figure out a way to make it work in the other extended domains? And theoretically, right now, heavy bias, but I believe memory models are going to outperform context window models. Um, I know I've been harping on context for a very long time. I don't want this to come off as hypocritical. It's just that, this industry does move fast. And, I have to be mindful of what I share when and what I'm like championing when. So now I would say memory models are going to outperform for edge devices than context windows. I strongly believe in that. And there's what I will say is my new favorite paper, the Titan paper, that demonstrates this. I think it's very appropriate for Tesla to look into that kind of stuff. That honestly makes hardware 3 more viable yet again, including a context window. But there will continue to be innovations like this that continue to drop the level of sparsity in these nets, right? We're going to continue to see compression. There's no indication that model compression is anywhere near done, even though I personally used to work in model compression. I don't work in that space as much anymore. But that's that's not because that space is done. It's just that, other factors.
Got it. All right, thank you, Wave. Um, do you want to talk about other AI topics, or do you want to talk macro?
I'd love to talk macro a little bit with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm curious how long you think Congress allows the executive branch to hold this temporary tariff power.
So he said he's going to.
Assuming markets stay down and what Trump's doing doesn't work.
If markets stay here or go down even like 10%, another 10%, I don't think the Congress will have the votes. They have to get 67% of the votes.
The votes for
both
what?
house to override his veto, basically. So there's a bill that's passing through the Congress right now that tries to remove or limit his powers to do what he's doing, and he already said today that he's going to veto it. And to override that, they need 67% of the votes, both in House and Senate.
And you think if the stock market crashes further, less congressmen will vote for it?
I said even if it goes down another 10% from here, they wouldn't be able to get those votes. He would have to crash a lot more, in my mind, for that to happen.
Gotcha.
If you notice, the pushback is coming from billionaires and liberals, but he's actually he's actually holding on to his popularism among his base, and because this argument that um, you know most of the stocks are owned by a very few person of the country is resonating with them, and it is a fact. But it ignores the second order effects that if you have a stock market crash, then millions of people will lose their jobs in the second half of this year. So I don't think his base is thinking about that second order effect.
Yeah, I know someone personally who, without saying too much about it, but like they have a business that sells trinkets and stuff to Disney, and they're like one of the large providers of stuff like that. And of course, most of that stuff is made in China. And there's like a huge convention in Vegas going on where all the people there are just discussing like, what are we not going to make this year? Because there's absolutely no way they can make it work with the tariffs. So like eventually products start to disappear, right? And people start to feel those second order effects too.
Yeah. Yeah. Some car makers announced that they're not going to sell their cars in US. I think many companies around the world are probably thinking like we should pause a little bit. So global trade is going down a little bit. That's why you're seeing oil prices decline. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think. I mean, I personally don't know when it's going to end. But I
So do you
think the
think that
damage
maybe
is
like
done.
car prices and like inflation actually kicks in as a result?
Yeah. Yeah, inflation forecasts have already increased quite a bit. I mean, the core PCE forecasts are now in 3 to 4% range. There's some forecasts as high as 5, and that's without incorporating the current tax rates. I mean, tariff rates.
So
So
do you think housing market comes down,
yeah,
or do you think Congress acts before like major effects happen?
Congress is not going to act before major impacts happen. It's just not going to happen.
I agree. I
Yeah.
felt stupid asking the question right after I asked it.
Yeah. And I really, I mean, they want to pass these like they want these tariff rates. I mean, look at this tweet on China. The one thing that's not being discussed enough, I think, is the impact on Tesla Energy. Tesla Energy, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Tesla Energy imports all the batteries from China, right?
Yeah, a lot of prismatic. Yeah, they get a lot of prismatic.
Yeah. So what would Tesla do?
Tesla has the ability to pass that cost off to their customers, though. Their customers are cities, right? They're not like, here's the deal. If a city's buying a battery pack, the value add there is really high, and there's nothing. Who else are they competing with? Tesla's not. There's no other manufacturer of batteries in the United States.
Well, at some point, I guess you start running into the marginal cost of running the current systems instead of buying these batteries.
Yeah, I agree with that. But
Mhm.
that would be true if it wasn't democratic states buying it for ideological reasons.
Anyway,
There's a lot of movement to get off of fossil fuels from an ideological standpoint in a lot of democratic states, right?
yeah, I think I think the prospects of Tesla Energy is vastly overstated among Tesla bulls. But what else is
Again,
new?
I
Right?
don't
There
really,
was-
I don't really agree. I agree with you that Tesla Energy is not a moat. So
Oh, you don't
both
agree with
Tesla.
me?
No, I agree with you. I think
Oh,
Tesla
okay.
Energy and Optimus are
So what is your
the
bull
reasons. By the
thesis?
way, that is the reason why I was selling the stock when it was getting to a certain price, because I was like, oh, okay, I don't agree with certain things, so I'll go ahead and sell at that price. But now that
So
it's below a
what
certain
is
price,
your
I'll
bull
buy.
thesis based on then? Because you agree that robotaxis, Tesla robotaxis won't proliferate. They won't be better than Waymo. They'll take years to go around the nation.
I mean,
You
my
agree that
thesis is
Tesla
like,
Energy. Hold on, you agree that Tesla Energy is not going to be a moat. So what is your bull thesis now? Why are you buying stocks?
very, very simply put, I think it's very easy bet to say to me that 10 years from now, like a long horizon, when I look at everything else that's happening in the market, there are only a handful of companies that are set up in a very long future to be dominating autonomy, whether it's robotics or cars. Tesla's one of those players. So to me, at a price where I think it's 5 million cars, $5,000 per car, I think that's very doable per year. I'm not saying next year, but I'm saying like I do think the production will get there. I also look at like the Q1 numbers and I look at the last 5 quarters combined, inventory is down. So I think it was the production, it was just the production halt. It's the Cybertruck recall. You can't sell cars while you're in a recall. I can kind of buy that Tesla's getting back to kind of not being demand constrained at the moment. It's just because their supply was massively constrained. If they can continue to resolve that, if they can kind of grow, if they can get the affordable car out there, if they can get autonomy out there, I do think they'll make $5,000 per car easily. I also think it's very reasonable to say they'll make $10,000 per car and they only need 2.5 million at that time. So my base case is a break even around 5 million cars, $5,000 per car per year.
By when?
At least 10 years. I'm willing to hold.
So in 10 years, you think Tesla will be selling 5 million cars a year for $5,000?
Making $5,000 per 5 million cars per year. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good luck with that.
If autonomy succeeds, that in and of itself happens, right?
You mean FSD unsupervised?
Yes, FSD unsupervised. Yeah. If FSD
Mhm.
unsupervised succeeds and you have one car making 50,000, you don't need 5 million cars anymore. You only need 500,000 taxis.
Mm-hmm. Well, the problem, however, is you're assuming FSD unsupervised only Tesla can do.
No. I'm saying 500,000 robo taxis. There's more taxis out there than 500,000.
Mm-hmm. But okay, so you switched to robotaxis now.
Yeah, no, like so basically the way I'm doing these numbers is I have 2 numbers and you can adjust one up and the other one down and you stay at the same break even. Right. So if you 10x the revenue, then you can divide the number of vehicles by 10.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's very simple. I agree. It's not a full DCF. It's just a simple approach, but then it allows everything else to be, as long as it operates at OPEX or it has a upside surprise, I profit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also,
So
as long as the
25
market
billion,
believes, as
25,
long as the market
25,
believes it's going to be exuberant, I can profit. So I just have a
25.
break-even number. If it goes above it, I sell. If it goes below it, I buy.
So $25 billion of annual operating profits, right?
Yes. And here's the other side. So if you want to know why I was selling at the other price point, it's because I think $10,000 for 5 million cars is a little excessive. So that gave you my price range, 5 to 10,000.
And you don't think Tesla can turn negative gross margin?
Even if it turns gross margin negative for a short period of time, I don't think it's going bankrupt. I don't think it's to be sustained. I think this company pulls out in the long term.
Well, I guess that's where the disagreement is. What gives you confidence that if Tesla turns negative bottom line or gross margin, that they can pull out of that?
I mean, ultimately, if Tesla's going negative gross margin, that means a lot of stuff has gone wrong in the supply chain, the economy, demand is dying for cars. So in a situation like that, like we saw with COVID, I think Tesla's better equipped to change up their supply chain, especially with tariffs. I think Tesla's best equipped to deal with dynamic situations. And as other automakers die off, they're going to have like, I still believe the other automakers are going to die off. So like, we're still going to buy cars. Like the thesis is just coming down to like bad environments are even worse for GM and Ford.
Yeah. So I guess we disagree on the long term, really. I mean, I don't think. I mean, we disagree on short term too, but I don't think that's what's really driving intrinsic value. I think the longer term of Tesla
Yeah, I
is
think we just
at
disagree on the
risk.
longer term. Yeah.
Yeah, is at risk. I don't think the fundamental issues Tesla faces in China and increasingly so around the world is going to change anytime soon. The
You don't think a new
competition.
president comes in who's friendly to China at some point in the next decade?
That's not what I'm talking about. The fundamental issues are the competition from China producing cars faster, better, at cheaper prices, ramping production 2 to 3 times faster. Those things aren't going to change. Whoever the president is.
I agree, but keep in mind the numbers I'm going with. They're already at 2 million cars a year. They only need to get to 5 million and have roughly the same gross margin. That's before autonomy.
Yeah, I mean, I think they might be lucky if they just keep the 2.
Okay, but like, if let's say the autonomy feature becomes a standard feature and they don't sell it as part of the car anymore, it makes the car more attractive.
I mean, yeah, let's assume that FSD is perfect, but you're also assuming that others can't do it when BYD
No,
is
I'm not.
included.
I'm not. I want to make that. I want to keep repeating. I'm not assuming others can't do it.
Mhm.
However, if you ask me, do I believe others can't do it? Yes, I think other automakers are going to really struggle that are not Chinese automakers. I also think a lot of the Chinese automakers, what you're seeing is just puffery. It's not actual fact, because boots on the ground. I know some people in China. Boots on the ground. It's markedly different. Now the UI for XPeng is way better than Tesla. And I've criticized this in spaces, and I've gotten like people yelling at me for saying that stuff. But guess what? That's a good thing. And the person who was in charge of that has just left Tesla. So I'm actually more confident to see the management changes that are happening there, because I have said for years, their software development, their releases, the fact that they didn't launch a Turo competitor, the fact that they don't have like their own like Uber, these are all indications of problems at that department. And seeing that shift makes me happy. I think now it's a question of like, will it get better?
Yeah.
They should be releasing software way faster.
Can I respond? So when you say Xiaomi's software is way better, I don't even need that. I just need as good.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
And BYD is including level 2 plus ADAS on
Sure.
cars that are as cheap as $10,000.
Do you think BYD becomes the only automaker in the world?
No, I don't.
Okay, so then do you think other automakers?
That's not what I need. See, here's I think maybe there's a mistake. Like there's a misunderstanding here. When I say Tesla will become the only automaker in the world, okay. First of all, I assume robotaxi come, etc. That is to justify, several trillions of dollars, $10 trillion of valuation, right? That's how you get to $10 trillion of valuation. If a company becomes like a dominant force in such a big sector, that is needed to justify $10 trillion. But to justify Tesla going down to 200 billion, I don't need to argue that BYD will get to 10 trillion.
No, I agree with you, but I'm not arguing about 10 trillion. I think that might be.
But that's what you're saying. You asked me, your question was, do you think BYD will become the only automaker in the world? I don't need that. I just need BYD and Xiaomi will be as good, not even better, as good as Tesla, to the point that Tesla is not making $5,000, $10,000 per vehicle, or charging $100 or $8,000 for FSD. You see what I mean? There's a distinct difference in that logical argument.
Yeah, I think maybe that's where we should start from. Do you think Tesla's not a success if it doesn't get to 10 trillion in 10 years?
No, I think it's a very great company. Still, I mean, I love the product.
Let's
If
say
I bought a car, I would probably buy Tesla.
Let's say the Tesla stock is at 2 or 3 trillion. Wouldn't that be phenomenal in and of itself? Even
Absolutely.
just 2 trillion. Hell, at this point, 1.5 trillion.
Absolutely. If they get back above $1 trillion, that's success.
Okay. So buying the stock when it's at 750 billion and thinking it's going to get to $1 trillion or above, and it's a pretty reasonable, safe bet, and there's still some upside surprises left. That's it. That's my whole thesis.
Yeah. I guess where we disagree is that's the reasonable bet.
Oh,
I
I
think
guess
the
that's fair.
reasonable bet is that it's going to go down $100 billion.
Oh, yeah. If it goes down to $100 billion, I'll buy even more.
hmm Well, you're not alone. I mean, retail investors bought $6 billion on the Thursday's drop. I'm sure they bought even more on Friday. There's evidence that there's more of that going on today as well. So I think that's going to continue for some time. Either they're going to be right or they're going to run out of money. I guess we'll see which one.
I agree. Yeah. I think the reality, though, is if not Tesla, then what do you go long? There's plenty to short. There's
Bonds.
plenty to short. Yeah.
You can't go bonds.
Well, bonds is a short. Going
No,
long
no.
bonds is shorting.
No. Yeah, exactly. You can go long bonds, especially in the short end of the curve.
I'm
You
asking. I'm
can
trying to challenge you
go
to find something you would go
long
long in
oil. You can
stocks.
go oil
Okay.
long. You can go oil companies long. Um,
Why
you
would you
can
go
go.
long on oil if there's going to be a recession and there's going to be less driving?
Well, that's short term though, right? I mean, I
Oh
am
no,
long
sorry. I was
oil.
trying to ask you in the
I'm
short
long
term. What do you go long?
I am actually long Occidental Petroleum, Oxy, OXY, which is my hedge
Are
on
you
if I
saying you like Oxy?
yeah. What was the saying? What's the quote from? Anyway, um, yeah, I don't think oil price at $60 is sustainable. So really,
Yeah.
any company you can buy oil is going to
You
play
think
out
it's gonna?
fine.
You think it's gonna go up pricing?
Yeah, yeah,
Do you think that
yeah,
continues to be the case even if America increases production?
yeah, yeah. Because Permian cost basis is not below 60. So
Okay. I think that's maybe something we disagree on, but I'm clearly very technologically biased, and I'll acknowledge I'll probably be wrong on this, but I choose to hope that that's not going to be the case.
mhm. And yeah, I don't think many companies will survive at oil prices below 60. But anyway, um, I also like the fact that it's a hedge on geopolitical risk. One thing I like about shorting is that things that are unforeseeable, really, like kind of like a COVID or a war
Yeah, they work
emerging
to
or
your
whatever,
favor. Yeah.
they work to our favor.
Yeah. Actually,
Um,
that's the whole idea of a balance trade, right? Like I said this to you, I think that was in private DMs, but like for a while I was looking for things to short, and Nvidia was a good one because it was in a space I understood, and it provided a lot of, return when the market went down.
yeah,
I wish I had held that short position longer than I did, but other than that,
you mean the call spread?
yeah, the call spread, or
hmm
just continue to roll it forward. Like
hmm
it expired, and I didn't like put it on again.
hmm Yeah, I was surprised by that. I was
Yeah,
surprised
me
by that.
too. I probably should have just kept doing it. Like I did have a reasonable belief it would get to 100. I don't know, psychologically
You
didn't
actually
like.
tried to talk me out of my short position on Nvidia.
I tried to tell you to take some profits. I didn't tell you to talk
hmm
you out of it. But
You
remember, I did.
said good not to, on February 4th. You said good not to fight the tide. I would exit anything I held.
Yeah. But that was because I was thinking that the Fed was going to cut rates faster. That's where our fundamental disagreement is. And
Mm,
I'm gonna concede if this tariff shit doesn't get resolved soon, you're probably gonna be right. I'm still hoping for 0.75 this year, though.
hmm On February 9th, you said now isn't the time
Yeah,
in this
because I thought the
space.
Fed was gonna start cutting rates. I didn't know the tariff shit was coming.
And then Nvidia sank on February 21st, started its downtrend, and since then it's down about 33%.
Yep, like I admitted, I wish I had held and not exited at that time.
hmm Well, I think in a month or two, you're going to wish that you weren't adding to your Tesla position either.
Maybe, but the difference with the Tesla position is I'm willing to hold it for a very, very, very long time.
Okay. I think you're more confident in, I mean, I think there's a risk that Elon may never come back to Tesla. He's very rich. He made his money. Um, he has his following. He has XAI that he didn't have. He has other companies that he didn't have that he can focus on now. And I think Tesla's products are fundamentally challenged by Chinese competitors to a much greater degree. And any thoughts on Grok?
Yeah, I think Grok is too expensive. I don't think. I think XAI is in the same boat as OpenAI to a degree. OpenAI is in a slightly less terrible boat, but I didn't see Grok issue any papers or any indication that they invented something. You cannot outcompete your competitors when you don't fully own your supply chain or you don't invent something. So all they have left is distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, like Microsoft and Google have better distribution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like at this point, the argument of who has the most users for AI is really silly because people will say it's ChatGPT, yet Google.com has AI summaries.
I
And
don't think
every
that. I
search
don't
result.
think that. I mean, people tell that to me, but I don't think that counts. I don't think that counts.
The cost still counts. If you can
No, I
serve,
understand.
if you can
Yeah.
serve every search query, clearly the cost is low.
Look, I understand AI overview is great for one kind of question that where you kind of answer, which is exactly why people search things sometimes, but most of the time. But you can't have a conversation.
You can have a conversation with AI overviews, but aside from that, my point is more so if you look at the billions of queries, multiply that by the cost, then look at their public statements, you can kind of figure out where the cost must be.
Let me ask you this. Machine is back, by the way. If he wants to come up and chat with you on anything, he's welcome to do so. But let me ask you one more thing. So ChatGPT dropped announcing the number of paid users a few months ago. And
Yeah.
they are increasing on free users at a slower growth rate. And they just completely dump. And I don't think the number of paid users has grown that much. I think there's a lot of churn across these services.
And they've also said that they're losing money on every paid user.
Yeah. Let me also just say one more thing is that before I ask my question on ChatGPT, I like the deep research function. I think it does produce better results, so that's great. But I run out of it because I use the $20 a month version. I run out of it. So what I do is immediately go to Gemini and just use their function, which is actually better. But why I don't use Gemini on a first go basis for regular stuff is because the UI just sucks compared to ChatGPT. There's really way too much stuff going on.
That's good feedback.
So, and I hope if there's someone from Google
Do
listening
you use
to
the
this
Gemini app or do you use their web browser?
web browser.
Use the
Yeah.
app, dude. Just use the app.
Yeah. Why?
Apps
I
are
mean, I
always
don't
better
use
than browsers.
ChatGPT. I don't use ChatGPT app either.
Just use the app. Your life will be better.
Why?
Because the app interfaces are always better than web mobile, both for Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini.
Okay, gotcha.
And Grok
Why do you
too.
like? Yeah, why do you like Claude?
Oh, Claude is really good for coding. Claude is really good for reasoning.
But I don't code.
You do ask reasoning and logic questions often, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Claude does excel at that.
Why is that, you think?
Anthropic intentionally did what I think Elon said he was going to do with Grok, but Grok ended up just being focused on making things that are funny and like fart noises. Like he spent all this time on like really silly things, in my opinion, personas. When you can't do anything else, do marketing. But what Claude did is they left Anthropic because of their concerns around what they were targeting and safety and all that, and they really focused on academic stuff. So the eval sets you target end up being the real persona of your model.
Gotcha.
So you can see it in that, when you see technical papers, you can see what they compete on, what they show, how they show it, things like that. Right now, there's two ways I try to see which is what's doing well. One is LMSys, but what I didn't like about LMSys, it wasn't cost. It wasn't, it was like quality at whatever cost, which is not a good comparison. So the Pareto curve that I showed you, and I think that's a good way to look at LMSys quality charted against publicly stated costs, and then make some assumptions about input to output.
Yeah, that's like saying Lucid has the longest range.
Yeah, who cares? What's the price?
Exactly.
Yeah, like you got to engineering is about trade-offs. So I really, really like that graph that person made that I shared with you, where it stacks quality versus cost.
Yeah.
But what's even better than that is Open Router, because Open Router just says where's the money going. right? Because Open Router is a open library that people use because all these models, like you said, people switch so often. So they just make these libraries, and all these third-party apps that are using it from a business-to-business perspective, they're using Open Router. It's the most popular one, and they can quickly switch which model they go to. And I think at least it's indicative of what's most popular. Now, way more models, way more binaries probably don't use Open Router, and they just do it themselves because it's not that hard. But I think it is reasonable to assume that it's predictive of the market overall, and dollars speak louder than anything else. Because, like, you don't always need the most high quality model, right? Sometimes you're better off using a lower quality model for whatever it is you're using. Let's say you're building a Craigslist and you want to be able to help people write nice, appealing classified ads. They write something and then you like generate a nice classified ad. You might be okay with using a small model and paying like, less than a cent per prompt versus paying $1.
Yeah, but I mean, most people aren't thinking that way. I
Engineers
don't know.
are. Engineers building the apps are. That's my
Right.
point.
I'm sure. Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yes. Exactly.
And I would argue the app
But is that what
developers.
matters? Do you think that's what matters?
Yes, I
Or do
think
you
the
think what
app
the average
developer
person?
dollar spend will be much larger than the chat subscriber spend, as we already see is moving more and more towards free.
Mm.
And the freemium chat thing becomes the thing to onboard you onto using it for the app where you spend the money with high query volume.
Building apps, you mean?
Apps, backends, yeah. Those like what you want is like the major corporations like Spotify and Amazon and all of them to be using your model because there's a ton of
Like
money.
when Apple chose ChatGPT is what you're
Or
saying.
when Amazon chose Anthropic.
Mm-hmm. But they bought Anthropic.
Yeah, but they also chose Anthropic. Yeah, fair. When Apple chose ChatGPT, that's a big deal because ChatGPT is making money on each of those. Depends on the negotiation, though, right? It's very possible ChatGPT is not getting paid for that query volume.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Although the integration sucks. Like I asked, "Hey Siri," and do you want me to ask ChatGPT? No, I want the fucking answer because whatever you do, I don't care. You know?
Routing is something we will talk about in the future, Yaman. But yes,
Okay.
you may have a hint as to me talking about that more often in the future as to what I might be working on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds good. All right. Okay.
I would say the number one issue right now is there's so many different models for different things that people have to figure out what to use when, and it's stupid. People just want one model that figures it all out for them.
I mean, I asked ChatGPT what are the differences between the different models I use, and it just didn't have a good answer. Like,
No,
dude,
it can't answer
like,
that.
yeah, like ChatGPT 4.0 didn't know 4.5 existed.
Yeah, because
Like,
ChatGPT still depends a lot on knowledge cutoffs, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
this is the thing. At the end of the day, all these models, they're supposed to use real-time stuff. Grok has one advantage that it can use X's data for real-time data, in so much as there's rich articles that start getting written on X, but scientific papers are not going to get published on X for quite a while. There's a long road there. Probably the Fed Reserve numbers, like regurgitated numbers might show up, like summaries might show up, but most of that stuff is going to be on the web somewhere. And so now you're competing between a search engine, whichever search engine, and
Grok still isn't able to do real-time stuff either. Like I often find things that
there's
are
also
dated.
there's
how
also
can you not
difficulty
do
in
that?
implementing it well. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, this is the problem. Like a lot of
And then
people.
the other thing I realized is that I'm not using AI mostly for real-time stuff anyway. Like it's very rare.
Exactly. Remember, we had a debate about this back in the day.
Yeah.
When it started, and I told you it doesn't really matter that much. People don't really care that much about bleeding edge real time.
Right. Yeah.
And here's the cost underneath it, right? The way models are built today, most models are built today. I have to caveat that because there's some papers showing other stuff. But yes, way most models work today, they expect all the data to be gathered ahead of time and then to operate on it, which means every single possible thing it may consider now becomes expensive. The second way you can go about it is these thinking models, where the thinking models say, here's what I think I need to gather. Then you go gather all that data, and then it parses that and figures it out. Well, if it thinks it needs to gather a lot of data, you now have to write heuristics as to how much of that data you actually pull, because if you pull too much data, it gets really expensive really fast. So you just run into these conflicts, and how you do that well, how you build a model to figure that out well, that's complicated. That's very complicated, and that could make or break the dollars on a model.
Okay. Any change? I mean, okay. Well, I mean, Nvidia came down so much that I don't even want to ask anymore. Are you looking to short it? But what else should we talk about? Talk about FSD. We talked about Tesla, macro. Anything else
Do
on
you want to ask
macro?
if I'm going to buy Nvidia at these levels?
Are you gonna buy Nvidia at these levels?
No. I'm not going to
Yeah,
short it though.
yeah.
I'm not going to short it. I'm scared.
Well,
I'm
I
scared
hear
money,
that
Yaman. I'm not trying to make crazy money. I'm just scared money.
I hear that kind of stuff from people, and but what you don't realize is that if you don't buy Nvidia, you are short the stock.
No, I'm not taking a position on it. There's a difference. I'm saying I don't know. It could go one
You
way.
are taking the position of being underweight. The
Okay,
only
fine.
difference of being short is you're underweight less than 0%.
Okay, fine. I'm underweight Nvidia. I'm shorting it effectively in your book.
Exactly. Because
I'm comfortable with that.
let's take it to an extreme. If Nvidia, let's say, goes up 1,000 times
I will short
and
it.
nothing else, nothing else goes up and everything else goes down. All of a sudden, let's say Nvidia found AGI and just fucking dominated the world. Anybody who held Nvidia would have all the money in the world and you'd have nothing, and everything would be priced, and you wouldn't be able to afford anything, even though you didn't short Nvidia.
Okay,
See what I mean?
for that disaster case scenario, you're right. I'm comfortable with taking that risk.
But the thing is, you are taking that risk to a much lesser extent.
Well, not entirely. I do own some like funds that probably own Nvidia, like ETFs.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, all right. Anything else I want to ask you about? We talked about Grok. We talked about ChatGPT. I think that's about it. Do you want to talk about anything?
No, I think you answered most of my questions. I was mostly curious about your macroeconomic takes. It sounds like nothing panic buying. I'll ask you a selfish question.
Mhm.
Buy a house now or don't buy a house now?
It depends on personal situation. If you're going to live in it.
To live in.
Mm-hmm.
Or let me ask you more specifically. Upgrade a house now or don't upgrade a house now that you live in?
Mm-hmm. And this is for just to live in. You don't care if it's like 10-20% cheaper. You're living in it for the next 20 years.
Oh, I guess I should. Yeah, okay. Yep, there are definitely personal things. Imagine the house is 3 to 4 times more expensive than the house you're selling. You're really upgrading the house, and you're going to live in it for a long time. So you want you want to get a really good deal.
But
on
here's
something.
the other situation. If you're going to sell one and buy another,
and sell a smaller house, like a lower
so
price.
you sell a smaller house. I personally would wait.
Okay. Wait for rates to come down or wait for a market to crash more?
I think the housing market will drop. Yeah, I think prices will drop.
Yeah, I believe that. I've seen some houses that were listed in November that have now come down 20%, which is shocking.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on geography, depends on the size, etc. But I do think that the overall housing market will have to come down for this inflation problem to be solved. And
do you think that happens after the MBSs are fully unwound?
Well, the MBSs are not being unwound.
I thought they were
Actually,
mostly
sorry, I'm
unwound.
sorry. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Is that? I mean, that's going to take several years. I don't.
No,
think
I thought they were almost done this year.
No. MBS isn't.
Was that just corporate?
Treasuries. They are. They basically reduced it to nothing. They're just doing $5 billion a month. but the MBS is continuing. He said they want to, like, quantitative tightening of MBS is continuing, and it's going to continue for the foreseeable future, is my understanding.
Yeah, but quantitative tightening means they're getting rid of MBSs, not acquiring.
Yeah, they're not replenishing them, so that means the spread between treasuries and mortgage rates should increase, all
Yes.
else equal.
Yes, I agree.
And on top of that, I think we're going to see rising delinquencies, foreclosures
Yes. Which means
in the
housing will
mortgage
come down, right?
market, and that will lead to housing coming down. Yeah.
Okay, so they have around 2 trillion in MBS right now.
Mhm.
And I thought they were dropping it at 0.8 this year.
No, I think I did this calculation, but let me just see for a second. I thought they were doing 25 or something. So it's going to take many years. Like, it's going to take 5+
Yeah.
years.
I just looked at this is coming from a model, so warning, but it's saying that apparently the reduction was about 8.5% last week.
No,
Okay, then it's wrong. Maybe that's after
Yeah.
the announcement or something.
you mean 8.5% of all MBS holdings last week? No, I don't know what that's referring to. But yeah, I think mortgage rates will stay high for a little bit. I mean, did you see the yield curve jump today? They jumped like 20%, at 20 basis points.
Yeah.
That's wild. And
Yield-
some people,
Long-term yield going up is a good time to, like, I guess, lock in more fixed. Yeah, I can agree with you on going long bond for a little bit.
hold on. So there's like different, competing factors at play here, right? There's the budget deficit that I think people are afraid of. That's why they're kind of selling these long-term bonds and the yields are going up. But on the other hand, I think a recession will happen. So I think the entire yield curve will probably come down. What happens after the recession? It's up for debate. Some people are saying that the U.S. is increasingly losing its reserve currency status. That these tariff wars could lead to China and others dumping their treasury holdings. That institutional investors may not want to see these budget deficits continue to rise. So the long end could blow out. So, but we don't really know but you and I also know that robotaxis and AI productivity is going to spread in the 5, 10, 20-year period. So that could lead to deflation. So there's a lot of moving parts at the same time. It's very hard to forecast out 5, 10 years. But in the near term, I don't see how the economy does not go into a recession. And if the economy goes into a recession, I don't see how the unemployment rate doesn't surge. And if the unemployment rate surges, I don't see how people don't fall back even further on their auto car payments and mortgage payments. And so I don't see how the supply doesn't increase in the housing sector. And I don't think
Do you think
demand
if
is
that
going
starts to
to.
happen, they just unwind the tariffs and then we're back to normal? Or do you think it's more sustainable?
No, I think these tariffs are here to stay. At least the 10% and maybe even more. I think these tariffs are here to stay. And I actually kind of see the point. I kind of see the point of, if we assume that humanoids are coming soon, that the US can manufacture things in its own borders as good as China or better, I do see the point. I just don't think humans are coming soon enough. So I think there's going to be a near-term pain. That's why I'm
Yeah, I
forecasting
think
recession.
I'm not gonna lie. I think Trump just doesn't like China. I think this is like some personal shit. I don't know that we need to worry this much about it. I think I'd rather be allies and friendly relations than like friendly competitors is better than enemies.
I think China's contribution to US GDP in the future isn't as high as is in the past.
Yeah, it's very possible. Though I think China is not as I say this fully knowing how Taiwan is going, but I think China is much more pragmatic, and a change in leadership can fix it.
What do you mean?
Like I think it doesn't last more than 4 years for sure. like China's concerns. So I think they just whenever they get an American president who's doing stuff they don't like, they just wait it out.
Hmm.
So they're not going to like do something that breaks the glass.
Okay, let's focus for a second in the near term, the 1 year period, next few months or whatever. Who do you think has more staying power
Between China and US?
in this tariff war? Yeah.
US.
Wow. Because Machine said earlier China, and I agree with Machine.
Oh, no, I don't agree.
Why do you think?
Here's my argument. And this is probably very flawed. We're going into speculation mode. China needs people working. If people aren't working, they start thinking, having like opinions, reading stuff, possibly protesting. Not good for China. They want to keep people working. They have something to be producing and doing. There has to be money coming in for that purpose. So they need to keep the wheels running for their economy to keep working and their government to stay in power. They're going to have to find someone else to make the purchases. There isn't a country out there that wasn't already buying from China. So losing American consumer is quite bad for China. Just like the last tariffs where they took a hit and still continue to sell products, I think they try to work out a deal where maybe, this is pure conjecture, they come to America and say, we'll buy some oil from you and we'll stop buying from China, from Russia and others. We'll buy some large exports from America to fix the balance.
Well, they're already buying oil from US.
Buy more, buy weapons, buy something else.
Yeah, I think you're mistaken. Tesla in China, BYD doesn't export to US or Canada. So
Yep. And
China buys oil, soybeans, and other commodities from the US, which
yes,
they can't
and yet
buy from elsewhere.
but we still have an imbalance, right?
Yeah, and they can't substitute those things from elsewhere, which means the impact of tariffs on China, inflation in China, isn't going to be as high as it will be in the US.
I'm not worried about their import capability. I'm worried about their export capability.
You're saying China must have the US customer.
Yes, I think China needs an export partner to keep their people working.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they end up building cities where nobody lives.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, let me think about that. Let me think about it. That's very interesting. I mean, they did come back with another round of tariffs, and Trump
Yeah.
pushed back.
I'm not saying they're going to go quietly into it, but last time they came around with a bunch of tariffs too, and they eventually settled down.
Let's say, for example, this goes on another couple of rounds, and then both economies are shambles. Which leadership gets replaced first?
Trump.
Yeah. But doesn't that alone say China has more staying power?
Right now, like you said, the people that are in Trump's base are not the ones that are panicking, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats actually have a really hard time painting the Republicans as pro-money.
Oh my
They have to
gosh,
change
yeah.
tune if this continues, right?
Yeah.
How do you come in there and be like, eat the rich, and then also kick him out? He's crushing the stock market and support the rich. Right? So if
Yeah.
anything, the Republican Party's narrative completely shifts, right? The Americans, when pushed, shove back, right? You bomb two of our towers, we bomb two of your countries, even
Mhm.
a completely unrelated country, right? Like America doesn't back down,
Mhm.
and they have
Mhm.
shown historically they don't back down. I wish the Warren Buffett imbalance was being used, but like I think a lot of countries are looking at it right now, and they're like, look, we just have to accept the fact that America is going to have a 10% tariff, and we need to have buying and selling with America that's even. And maybe countries start implementing import certificates. But I think it would be good to just have import certificates for America. I think Warren Buffett is a genius. We should listen to him 22 years ago. Like, I don't know why he doesn't like say, he should have been like yelling this at presidents and be more vocal about it.
Yeah, the dude is a genius. It's incredible what he has accomplished in 100
He's
years.
100% a genius. Yeah, I agree.
It's incredible.
I don't know if you
He
have ever
says-
been to Omaha,
He says
but I
he's
plan
not
to go
a
to
genius.
Omaha this year, by the way.
Oh, you really?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe I'll meet you there then.
Okay,
I've never
that'd be
been.
fun. Yeah,
Why
that'd
would
be
you be
fun.
going?
Pardon?
Why would you be going? Oh, you don't have to say.
Yeah,
but we
just
can't chat offline.
we'll chat offline. It's just a
Yeah,
fun
I'll
thing to
miss you
go
there.
to, and I
Yeah.
have friends in it, so might as well go.
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Well, let's leave it on that note. Thank you very much for joining. Always fun chatting with you, and chat with you all next time. Take care.